I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and speak with you guys. A couple things, if you know me, I've seen you out in some of the peer groups. You know I am a walker when I talk, so you might see me moving around. I hope it doesn't cause you guys too much stress. Hopefully you're just focused on the slides. The elephant in the room, a lot of people ask me about the two titles, Pinnacle Financial Partners, a top 50 bank in the US, plus also I have a second job for the bank. In 2017, after being out and speaking with a lot of my peers out there, being out on the road, and just meeting with other banks, we found that there was a lot of need out there. There's a lot of banks that still are struggling, still are trying to get their security posture tightened down, trying to get things in place. So the bank decided we were going to go out and launch our own managed security operation services. So we're doing this today for other banks. So that's why the two titles. I am CISO at Pinnacle and also running one of their divisions. So today we're going to talk about SIEM and leveraging a SIEM. Before we get started, I realize that in every session that everybody kind of comes at different places, right? Some of you might have a SIEM, some of you are thinking about a SIEM, some might have a SIEM that is already going horribly wrong or struggling. So I'm going to talk about all of those today. But before I get started, I got people that know me. I always try to. It's a pretty serious topic, so I try to lighten the mood a little bit. I always tell a dad joke. I'm a father of four, so I'm known for them. So here's my icebreaker for you. I was in the kitchen last night talking with my wife, and I was talking very quietly. And she said, "Why are you whispering?" And I said, "Well, I don't want Mark Zuckerberg to hear us." And she laughed, I laughed, and Alexa laughed, and Siri laughed, and Smart TV laughed. And I did this. So I knew that I also am visual, and I didn't have anybody else here. I'm just talking to myself. So little app there for self-assurance. So we're going to talk about what a SIEM is today. We're going to get into the initial what SIEM, and for those of you who call it SIEM, stop, just stop. It's a kind of a north-south thing. Some people call it SIEM. Makes me think of a clothing, you know, SIEM in your clothing. I call it SIEM. So as you hear me all day today talking about a SIEM, that's why. The original. So for those of you who are not too fun, I realize I've also got CEOs on the line. I got everybody from technical to different groups. So I'm hoping to have something for everybody. A SIEM's the reason why we got a SIEM, or the reason why we looked at SIEMs, is we see that there are really four different phases of a SIEM. They collect data from different log sources. They collect them from network devices and servers. They aggregate that data and they normalize it so that we can, so it's pulling it together and normalizing it so we can read and use that data. Then we analyze it, correlate it, and enrich it. When you think correlate, think sort. When you hear enrich, think make better, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. And then finally, detect. Once you detect, you're able to alert and pinpoint security events and really bring some visual, get this in front of you, some visibility. I always say start with a why. Why do most banks want a SIEM, have a SIEM, think you need a SIEM? These are the top answers that I get in some of my peer groups. First and foremost, because the FDIC says so, because I'm supposed to have one. Some want it because they want to automate manual work. They're doing a lot of reviews for their audits, and they want to automate that. So this is the worst reason, because the risk and government team, risk officer, told them they got to have one. They want big data, and you'll see, as I said, I'm going to try to insert a little bit of humor here throughout some of my pictures. And then others say they want it to because they want machine learning and behavior analysis, big buzzwords right now, right? Our bank has machine learning. It's a big question that they're asking. And then finally, they want a single source for fighting advanced threats. As you can imagine, all of these are the wrong reasons, and a SIEM is not a single source for fighting advanced threats. So we talk about why you need a SIEM, and it's leverage. You want leverage for your information security program. You want leverage on your posture, right? The SIEM is the actual device that will give you leverage. The definition of leverage is the action of a lever, or the mechanical advantage gained by, right? Or another one is power and effectiveness when you're trying to gain, for example, more leverage on something. So that's what this is about. That's what a SIEM really should do for you, is provide leverage, not be an end-all be-all, right? You should want it because you want visibility. You want to collect and correlate and identify threats in your organization. You want to focus. I say this a lot. It's a big it's a big soapbox of mine that you need to get out of the haystack of needles, and you need to get into you need to get out of searching for haystacks for that one needle, and you need to get into haystacks full of needles. That's really what your SIEM should do for you, is really collect all of that data and bring it to you and say, here's all the data we should be focused on, not off on a wild goose chase trying to find things, right? Quick response, dwell time. I don't know if you guys realize this, but over the last few years, the information security tools and things like SIEM have really started to help. The Verizon report tells us even as few as 6 years ago, it was 300 days of dwell time, right? Dwell means the existence of a bad guy in your network and you don't know about it, right? I think I can't see my notes. The slide here is kind of condensed them, but I'm gonna build it out. It was something like 90 days, was reduced down to 90 days just a few years ago, and I think in last year's 2019 report, it's down to 60, I believe. But that's what quick response can do for us. Insight, the identity of areas of weakness and aid in forensic. It gives us the ability to do more and have more, and then compliance and exceed regulatory requirements. And yeah, I just pulled up the note. My associate here gave me the notes. 300 days a few years ago, 71 in 2018, 60 days in 2019. So we are able to reduce that dwell time. And of course, we always need it for our compliance. We need to be able to say for SOX and GOBA that we do have this ability. What a SIEM is not. A SIEM is definitely not an easy button. It's very complex to deploy. We're going to talk about that for the rest of this presentation. It's very costly to own. It's not a single source solution. It supports your platform. It's not something that you need to replace things with. It definitely just supports. A SIEM is not the answer to all your problems. As a matter of fact, if you have a poorly maintained or poorly stood up or poorly thought out SIEM, it's going to actually add risk to your overall security platform. The real risk of having a SIEM is, and I'm just going to go through several of these, right? Is once you get a SIEM stood up, and let me pause for a second and tell you kind of where I'm coming from. At Pinnacle, we have owned 2 of the top right quadrant SIEMs, right? We've literally owned two of them, and of the banks I've helped set up, we've been able to be a part of implementation and support of all of the Gartner top right SIEMs. So when I'm talking to you today, it's out of direct experience or experience that I've had with other banks. So one of the things that we hear a lot is as soon as you get it turned on, they underestimated how much alerts they were going to get, right? And what that leads to is you get a ton of alerts, a ton of false positives because the rules weren't necessarily thought out right. They get a lot of noise, and what that leads to is it leads to the CISO and or the team filing the alerts, for writing rules in Outlook to manage the alerts, right? And once you start to file them, you forget that, oh, I'm supposed to go into that folder every day and take a look, make sure there's nothing in there that I was actually supposed to be looking for. And again, that sounds a lot like searching for needles in a haystack, right? So it's not really doing you any good if you set up a SIEM and you've got all this alert now, you got all this noise, and now you've actually been alerted to something that is a real threat, and it's undetected because it's over in one of your Outlook rules. And what I want you to think here is, you think, that would never happen. I want you to think Target. The big Target breach that happened years ago was actually that. They actually did catch that breach long before it happened. They had a device on the network, and it caught it and alerted, and the people on the team just didn't see that alert. So it is very big risk. And if I think about this, if you're a CISO and you're the guy in the seat, right, and you do have an event, and you bring in your forensic team, you bring in your incident response team, and they tell you, oh yeah, your tools actually caught it, and your tools actually gave you an alert, right? That's huge risk to be able to go to your CEO and say, yeah, our tools caught it, because that's the first question they're going to ask is, why didn't we catch it? Why didn't we know about it? And it's worse for you to have a SIEM and be catching things and not know about it because it was just too much noise. More risk of having a SIEM that you poorly planned. Budget issues. I've walked in behind some people that were building out some SIEMs, and they were getting crushed, and it was because implementation can drag out for months. I've talked to some banks that were working on it for 14 to 16 months, and they still weren't up. They still weren't in detection mode yet, right? You've got to really think about the production impact. So SIEM starts to really create a lot of it's pulling in all of this data, and if you don't put the SIM in the right place, you could start to congest your network, whether it be the local network, or you could start to congest your pipe if you're sending alerts out, or if you're managing stuff out onto cloud or wherever. So at least one of the ones that we had was a cloud offering to begin with, and it affected our pipe. So you have to think about that. You definitely don't want to turn this thing on and then have to turn it right back off. And then finally, scale, and this is one I'm actually fighting with right now at Pinnacle, is we built out, again, one of the best SIMs that are out there. It's been running now for 4 years, and we're now basically rebuilding it again because it's already at size constraints. Because once you get a SIM, what you're going to find out is once you start to get more data, once you start to have more use cases, you're like, okay, now that I know I can do this, I want to also go look for X, Y, and Z, where I want to see X, Y, and Z use cases. So keep in mind, again, I tell people, go to the end and work backwards. Tell me what you want your results to be, and then work backwards, right? So more risk of having a SIM, and this is blind spots, right? You get a false sense of security. If you try to do this on your own, or you don't bring in a professional partner or somebody who does this every day, you risk having a false sense of security, thinking, oh, I'm seeing everything, and guess what? You're missing east-west traffic. You're only seeing north-south traffic, or you're missing segments, or you haven't worked with IT and you don't understand that when they put new computers on the network or servers on the network, or they didn't do certain things, that you haven't pushed your sensors out to them, you're blind. You think it's all good until all of a sudden one of your other tools are going off and you say, wait a second, how did that happen and I didn't get alerted to it? How's this going on and I wasn't aware? It's because you have blind spots. So you have to be aware of those and make sure you've thought through your entire network. And the biggest one that I would say by far that everyone gets into is consider the support impact. SIMs are a beast to own, and I literally think about it as such, to feed and maintain, feed and care such a creature. It's only going to get bigger. It's not going to get smaller once you install it. It's not going to your scope is not going to decrease. Once you get a SIM in place, it's only going to get legs and increase, right? So you have to think about that, because you've got to have a subject matter expert, a dedicated subject matter expert, right? Even if this is true, people say, well, I've got a partner. You still have to have someone on your side that can talk to them and be a subject matter expert on this. If that subject matter expert gets sick, it gets COVID, right? Whatever it may be, you've got to have somebody that can step in and do backup. The second thing that most people don't think about is the impact to their SOC or the impact to their operations. Talk to a lot of banks, there's only 1 or 2 guys in cybersecurity. And now you got all these alerts that you have to go do something with. You can't just get an alert and go, yeah, that's nice, and so you have to go do something with all of this data that you've now created, right? You've now created indicators of compromise. You've now created security events that need to be looked into. Who's going to do all that work? And we think, well, I'll give that to IT. IT's already overworked as well, right? They don't want any extra work from you. And many times IT doesn't know what to do with what you're going to give them, right? Then you got to think about after-hours support. A lot of times, I mean, you can imagine what the number one time most banks are attacked. If I had audio right now, I would give you a question and let you guess which days you think, or what time of day, right? The obvious answer is you're attacked after hours, right? You're attacked when nobody's there, or when they think that you're not there. The number one time that banks are attacked, holidays, right? Because they know banks take holidays, and they realize that most people give off their support staff so that they can kind of catch their breath. It's the number one time banks are attacked. It's the number one time we're attacked. So you got to think through that after hours. Who's going to be there 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365, right? I heard the analogy, I thought it was good in one of my peer groups, that SIM is like a bike. You got to keep pedaling. You stop pedaling, what happens, right? You fall over. You got to work to maintain it. It's only as good as you maintain it, right? Kind of like a hamster on a wheel. You got to keep running. Oh, I went backwards. Hold on. Now let's talk about how to leverage a SIM, right? Let's talk about things that we can do, the top 5 things that, if I had to sit down and share with you to say, hey, these are the things, if you're thinking about getting a new SIM, if you're thinking about changing your current SIM, or if you're thinking about a partner or a new solution, Here's top 5 things I would really consider, right? You want to go in with your eyes wide open, right? You want to make sure that you are planning the entire architecture, the scope, the budget. You want to consider the things that I said before. Consider the impact to your production, your compute, your storage, and your bandwidth. Those are 3 things that I'm fighting with right now. I'm actually, again, rebuilding. I'm looking at moving my storage from disks on the servers to a storage array. That's how much data I'm starting to collect. You also have to think about once your data size grows, right? You are now, from FFEIC guidelines, supposed to maintain and keep that data, right? So you got to keep it for a minimum of, I think their recommendation is 3. Some banks keep it 6. Some banks keep it a year. You got to keep that data now. So you got to come up with a plan of how you're going to potentially archive some of that data. I will tell you that going into it with eyes wide open will help you define the start and the finish. This is what success looks like to us, right? You wanna make sure that we'll talk here about log sources, right? You need to make sure that you get the right identification of log sources. You need to baseline your current log sources and sizes to understand, right? So even starting with a proof of value or a proof of concept is not bad, so that you get a baseline. You don't know what you don't know until you turn it on. So getting a proof of value or proof of concept to kind of baseline some of that's good. I'll tell you that this is one thing that you really need to write down and underline. More data is more data. It's not better, right? Feeding everything into this because you want machine learning, because you want it to be the end all be all. This is not what you want, right? You want, matter of fact, I run mine through a Gigamon so I can dedupe data, right? So I'm trying to only send the right data to the SIEM. I want to send high fidelity is the word that we're really looking for. High fidelity data is what I want going there. I don't want to just dump anything and everything in, right? There's no reason to just dump anything and everything in. I want to be very, very careful, and I want to understand the corollary between data sources and what that means to, as I do more searches, I have to understand the impact to my compute, which means more processors on more servers. I got to understand the corollary to when I want more compute, okay, now I want to see these things. Okay, well, what's that mean to how much more storage I need to put in place, and how much more bandwidth, both local bandwidth, right? So we have, like all of you guys, we have got presence across the US, right? So we've got MPLS circuits, we got circuits to everywhere. You're going to start to tax those circuits that are between here and wherever your other data centers are. So you got to consider the whole thing. Again, very, very critical. Develop a hard timeline for your implementation with your key milestones and deliverable. Regardless if you're using a partner or not, you need to drive it. You need to be very clear with your partner what the success dates are and what the milestones are and what the deliverables are, and then limit creep. Somebody comes in, your risk officer comes in and say, hey, I heard we're getting a SIEM. I also want you to watch for these, X, Y, and Z. You say, no, that can be phase 2. And keep that out, because you've got to keep this. Otherwise, you're going to go back to what I said. I've literally walked into banks where they've spent a year and a half, and they're not even into tech mode yet, because they're still in this baseline. They're still in this, okay, well, we didn't understand that. All right, now rebuild it, add more scope, add more pieces, right? And then as soon as you get through phase 1 of getting it up, plan for and make sure you've got automation in place, right? Make sure that you're using, there's lots of I could talk to you about a whole other topic, which is SOAR, right? Security orchestration and operations, right? So this is taking menial tasks that you do and automating those tasks. Very, very key. Once you can see how having a SIEM really is owning something, a creature. Develop use cases. Sometimes I say this and people go, well, tell me what your use cases are. Tell me what some things I should be looking for, right? Again, I say this very openly. I say this to, if you're risk and you're on here, don't take offense. It's just, you need to tell risk, whatever they want, go get Watson, right? You need to do this for your information security posture. You need to do this so that you can see the threats and you can identify things that are happening in your organization. And they're not all bad guy threats, as you can see in some of these corollaries, right? I'll give you a use case. I'll just pick a couple off this page. I'm not going to read them all to you. But one of the things that we use it for is account management. So this is user account creation or privilege escalation, right? How many times does an IT guy who's got domain admin credit just go ahead and say, oh yeah, Bill on the IT team needed to do some special project, so I just went in there and gave him domain admin for that project, but oh, by the way, I never remember to turn it off. no one knew or approved it, and didn't follow our approval chain, didn't follow our, right? It's going to be an audit finding. So we want to know the second that somebody escalates, because I don't have total control over those who have ability to do so. I need to be able to at least have insight when they're doing it. So for example, at our bank, if somebody does that, I get an alert. My SOC calls the IT help desk and says, I want to know what ticket is assigned to this, and who was the authorizing party that said this was okay. And then we put that on our security event to close it out. If we don't have one, I then escalate to the manager of that team to say, this was unauthorized, it needs to be backed out, and you need to go talk to them, right? You can have things like connection, outbound FTP or SFTP, right? You may want to know if somebody tries in your business to try to set up. Maybe you're not blocking FTP at the firewall. We are doing that, but let's just say I've talked to other banks where they don't. They need it for whatever reason, and you might want to know when somebody's trying to set up an unsecure data connection, just a regular FTP connection, right? The easy ones at the bottom, threat detection, anomalous, those are easy ones, right? But you might want to know, for example, I go to the bottom about it, advanced correlation enrichment. You might want to know if somebody's on your network, even if it's an IT guy who forgot the password, and they keep entering passwords and getting a reject. No, this is not the right password. You might want to know about that so you can go check into it. Hey, who's trying to get on this server right now, doesn't know the password? These are use cases, and we have, for example, when we go in and work with banks on SIEM, we have about 50 canned right out of the box that we say, these are 50 you should consider, and then you start to think through your own use cases, right? And these need to develop, again, for analyst by analyst, because you know what it is, where you want to have visibility. Care and feeding, I mentioned this before, right? This is you got to be careful. I threw this in for all you Florida people. Care and feeding of this beast, right? You've got a plan for your impact support. I mentioned this before. Make sure that you have more than one PTO in case that person's out, because Murphy's Law always says that's exactly when you're going to need them, right? Have a plan for after hours, whether it's, some banks like to do their own SIEM during the day and then have a partner for after hours. That's okay too. But make sure you have a plan. Go into this again with the eyes wide open. Make sure that you have trained information security analysts ready to catch and run with the alerts. And I say this because you can create a lot of noise and a lot of confusion and a lot of chaos if you don't have security professionals that know how to read the alert and know what they're looking at, right? So they can, oh my gosh, somebody just did this, as opposed to, okay, I know what this is saying, I know what this means, and I know exactly where to go, right? In our case, in our SOC, we have what's called SOC run books. And I would tell you, if you're going to attempt this on your own, make sure you do that. Develop if then this, right? If we get this alert, then you do the following 3 things, and then, so that way it happens the same way every time, right? It's called run books. Again, see prior military. Think about your granular change inside your run books based on use cases, like, you know, if then and this during the day, if then and this after hours, if then and this if it's a VIP. So for example, we have a list of VIPs at our bank, and if you can imagine, if something is happening with the CEO's account or the risk officer's account or the CFO's account, I probably want to know about that more so than what I do when I've got a teller, you know, who's having the same issues, right? So you want to think through your triage and what matters most and when you want to know about those things, right? And again, identify and plan for automation. I can't stress this enough. The maintenance, the care and feeding is a serious time commitment. Deploying and updating agents, parsing logs, writing new parsers, performing upgrades, updates, all of this has to happen. And again, as I said here at the bottom, automation is key. Automation is the way to make this happen. Automation is the way you can use your security orchestration automation tools to actually deploy the agents for you. You can use them to help parse and gather logs. You can write new parsers that actually parse the data better, faster, easier. And partnership. You got to have, whether or not you're going to outsource and have a service partner help you with this, make sure you got a strong partner with whoever your solution is. So if you're running one of the top right Gartner solutions, make sure you've got a great relationship with them. Number 4, top 5 things is to build for and plan for enrichment and context from the start. Again, I mentioned what is enrichment and context. So an alert, and I'm gonna look at an example, show you an example, but an alert without context, again, creates noise, and everybody will jump on that thing and they'll prioritize that above everything else, when if you just add context, you might say, and save a little bit of time, right? I just put some examples here. A lot of the SIEMs out there today allow for APIs. They allow for connectivity to things like the WHOIS process library, vulnerability scanner, recorded future, things like that. These will add context, right? And I also give you a caution here. Don't go into this thinking machine learning and behavior analytics up front until you get your basics down, right? Too many people head into this thing with all these, I want to know when, and you're thinking about advanced threat detection, right? Start with base. If you can't tell when somebody's escalating privileges on your network, you should not be worried about. You shouldn't be spending a lot of time on advanced persistent threats, right? You should be focused on the basics first, then escalate that. And we do that in phases. We tell people to do that in phases, phase 1, phase 2. You're always think tuning. We talk about this a lot. I didn't put it on any of the slides, but we call that tuning, right? When you're going back in and tweaking, you're making your SIEM better. That's called tuning. Let's look at an example and why it matters. And this is about the correlation or enrichment, right? So let's say you get a SIEM alert and you've got a SIEM alert set up that you want to know if there's any EXEs that run on the servers in the middle of the night. Let's just say that that's one of your use cases. I want to know if something kicks off and there's a program that starts running in the middle of the night. And you get an alert that maintenance services.exe was just launched on a server, right? So you get up and you start logging a ticket, and you're going to scramble the jets, and you're going to get all the guys working on it. You're going to wake up IT and after-hours support. You're going to go figure out who's running this EXE, because there's nobody in the office right now. So who's running this, right? Without the context, that's exactly what you're going to do. You're at a very minimum going to be having people, Google and spend time on digging into this, right? But if the alert came in with this context that's shown there on the screen, if you knew, for example, that the name of this, that this whole program's name was the Mozilla Maintenance Service, and you knew that the command that it was running, you can see right there that here's where it's running. It's running in Mozilla Maintenance Service, maintenance.exe, and then the description says, hey, this Windows service is used by Firefox to update silently in the background, right? And we've seen it one time. So with that context, with that enrichment, with that wrapper, right? I always tell my kids to frame their communication, set it up, right? So with that framing, you can say, I can ignore this. Now, I might want to go figure out and ask why that we have somebody trying to load Firefox in the middle of the night or update Firefox in the middle of the night, but it's not that's a maybe wait till tomorrow morning and do it. So that's part of what context can do for us. So I'm going to click the next one. Choosing the right product, right? So again, all SIEMs are not created equal. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give you some more caution in some slides coming up on how to pick and where to pick, but all SIEMs are not. As a matter of fact, we got so much confusion in the SIEM marketplace right now that it's scary. But here's some basics that you want to make sure of. And really, it's in no particular order. I would even start with the very last one I listed there as one of the most important things. Make sure the product's mature. Everybody's coming out with a new SIEM. Everybody's starting to be, make sure it's mature. You might have some smart IT guys that can go stand up a open source SIEM. I'm hoping that I'm giving you enough, that the decision makers here, I'm giving you enough pause to say, probably not the wisest move. It's not a could question, it's a should, right? Make sure that your SIEM has the ability to enrich data. It supports automation, and it supports pulling in and working with other source solutions, right, that are out there. There's tons of source solutions that are out there. Some of these SIEMs actually have an built-in SOAR. So that's another thing to look. Does it have something that's built in? Maybe you don't want to have to buy two different products, buy a SIEM and buy a SOAR. Well, look for a SIEM that has that built in. Make sure you've got the ability to create, to do use case detection. Make sure that you've got the ability to integrate threat intelligence. Again, threat intelligence is going to be the #1 way you bring in context, right? Known bad IP, known bad threat, indicator of threat, indicator of compromise. Make sure that your product has the ability to scale. This is something that you need to ask right out of the gate. At what point do I have to then rip it out and get a new appliance, or rip it out and get a new box? At what point because they're going to ask you these things when you're starting to scale. How big is your internet pipe? You should say, your question back should be, what is the limitation, right? Tell me about that, because some will go up to 1 gig, some will go up to 10 gigs, some will go to 100, So you want to know, and you want to plan for where you're at today and what you think it is today, so that you've got the ability to scale without having to rip everything back out. And I mentioned maturity, but the last one is supportability, ease of use. I've looked at some of these things and they look like a NASA switchboard. It looks like I'm trying to operate the space station, right? It's like 75,000 things, and I've actually thrown products out. When I've reviewed them, I've thrown them out because they're wonderful products, and the tech is great. But it's not about what I like as the CISO. It's not about what I like about what it does. If my guys can't operate it, or my guys have a hard time operating it, then they're gonna A, revolt and probably not use it, or B, ignore a lot of it and not using. So you want to make sure that it has an ease of use. I mentioned this before, evolution. Think confusion of SIM. There's a lot of people, the original, now we're starting to call SIMs, as I defined earlier in this deck, they're starting to call those traditional SIMs or log-centric SIMs, and they're trying to differentiate themselves with next gen, right? Think shiny new 007 gadgets, right? Traditional products out there, Elastic, which is the Elk stack, Logarithm, IBM, QRadar, Splunk. These are all top right traditional, right? What I'm calling Me Too products, or people who are also like saying, oh, we've also got a SIM, right? Exabeam, who does user behavior analytics, now is trying to rebrand themselves as a SIM, right? They're saying, hey, we're not just a UBA platform, we're really a SIM, right? Rapid7, vulnerability scanner, right? They're now also have a SIM, right? People like Sophos who do antivirus also have a SIM. Fortinet has the FortiSIM, right? Everybody's got a SIM. Everybody and their mother is doing SIM today, right? So again, beware of those confusion boundaries. I always say, focus on the people who do what they do well, right? I don't want my dentist, doing open heart surgery on me, right? Even though he's got some training, he could technically do it. I don't necessarily want that, right? There's solution approaches, which AT&T bought AlienVault, Dell has SecureWorks, regional, Fred Schmalen's AlienVault. A couple of them. There's a couple out there that I really get a kick out of. One of them is called Datadog. That was they didn't have these are places that didn't have a marketing team. Another one's called the Simulator, right? That is not a SIM. So just be careful. There's a lot out there. Then you could go partner approach, which is you find a partner who will help support your product. You might want one of those traditionals, or you might want the Me Too, and you get a partner to help you implement and support what you have put in place. One of the tools I put here at the bottom, please do not click on this link, just copy it. It's a whole other soapbox about clicking on links. Just copy it and paste it into your browser, or just go Google SANS, an evaluator's guide to next gen SIM. It's a good article, says some of the similar things that I'm saying here today. It just tells you it's a white paper from SANS. And if you don't know SANS, get to know SANS. They're a great resource. And finally, we want to look at finding the right partner. You want a lifeline. That show years ago, The Millionaire, where you got a lifeline. You want to be able to call somebody if you get in a pinch. You want to be able to call somebody, or make sure you've got somebody you can rely on. If you find a partner, here's a couple of things, or when you're looking for a partner, here's a couple of things to keep in mind. Make sure that you understand out of the gate, you still have a role. You cannot just pass this off, right? Or you should, again, this is could and should. You should not. You should not just pass this off. You shouldn't just give this to another partner and say, hey, they manage my SIM. You need to understand. Otherwise, you're complicit, and you will not, those blind spots, and trust me, I've watched it happen. The partner say, well, you didn't ever ask us to look for that. You never told us that that was something that you were interested in. So make sure that even if you've got a partner that's going to do this for you, you've got expertise on your side, even again, if you have to bring that in. Again, second bullet point here, make sure they have expertise. Make sure that they are telling you what you should do and telling you about what best practices are, as opposed to just coming in and saying, all right, tell me what you want to do, right? They should be guiding you and saying, like I said earlier, here's 50 that 50 use cases you should start with, and maybe this will start to give you this will start to help you build some questions in your mind to build your own. I'll tell you this, I'm going to give you some real world experience that I had, and I say here, beware the big guys. I have had two of the top, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you who they were. I had Dell SecureWorks at one point, and when I first got to the bank, they had Dell SecureWorks already, and we also had IBM QRadar. We were one of the first clients out there to have that in the cloud with IBM. And the problem that you've got, while they're both good technical products, the problem that you've got with the big partners again is that they're in it for turn and burn, right? They're not. IBM could care less, and I thought it was really, really telling that even as big of a bank as we are, they basically told us they didn't care. One of the problems I had with them was with IBM, they deleted my data in the cloud twice. So think about that for a second when you're thinking about going into the cloud. So I had their IBM, I had their QRadar solution, and one of the engineers one night, we were in the middle of an audit, is how we found it, and they wanted us to go back and pull some existing logs for our audit and say, okay, you're supposed to keep logs from 6 months ago. Here's 4 different scenarios I want you to pull from in these time frames that are all 6 months ago. When I went to look for it, data's gone. We said, wait a second, where's our data? Where's our archive data? And they said, oh, let us look into it, log the ticket. Of course, it wasn't the day that I logged the ticket that I got back. It wasn't even the next day. I had to keep escalating. I had to keep pulling teeth to get it out of them, to only find out that somewhere in one of their platforms, one of their lower level SOC guys was reading our contract one night and thought it said 3 months instead of 6 months retention, hit a button and changed it and deleted it. And I said, okay, I understand that. We all make mistakes, put it back. Just undo it. But we can't, they told me. I said, you're IBM and you cannot get my data back. Nope. So you don't have a backup you can restore from? Nope. The way our platform works, when you hit the button, it just deletes it. So guess what I had? Audit finding. And I left IBM over that particular incident. They did it again to me, which was, I'm trying to leave, and they still did it again. But same thing with again, Dell's a big company. It's a great company. However, the problem we had with Dell was, I went through a particular sustained attack and realized I never got an alert on it. Same thing, I got one of those, well, you didn't tell us you wanted to look at that. Okay, you're supposed to be the experts. I would have expected that's something we talked about. Again, I wasn't there when they first implemented it, but and then the other thing that we found is when we call to log a ticket, they go, oh, wait a second, I don't do that. You're talking about an alert on the firewall. That we need to get you the firewall group. Talk to the firewall group. Well, you're actually talking about something else. I needed you to get to the tier 2 firewall group. 3 hours later, I finally get to somebody that can actually talk to me. And again, they just don't care. So be very, very careful, especially the smaller bank you are. You want that more intimate. You want that more. You want to be able to. The old saying in the service business is one throat to choke, right? You want to have a partner that you can literally call the CEO if you need to. Make sure that you understand that your priorities and your timeline are not their priorities and their timeline. They have hundreds, thousands of other accounts. Again, if the bigger they are, the more they have. Keep in mind that you need to make sure and be an advocate for what your timelines are, what your priorities are, and make sure that you are your own advocate. Don't get caught in that victim thing where, well, they told me they kept dragging out. We'll get another resource on it. We'll assign someone else. We'll get some more. Can't figure out why that's not happening. Make sure you got expertise out of the gate. Make sure you check references. Talk to other banks that they've implemented one in. It's one of the things I absolutely do. This is how I've gotten to know a lot of my peers is I call them up, say, hey, I'm thinking about getting this product. I heard you implement it. Tell me about it. Tell me about that's invaluable. The information you can get from your peers are very, very important. And then finally, just realize that no matter what these next gen SIEMs tell you, there is no silver bullet. There's no magic box. There's nothing that solves it all. What I told you is still true, regardless of the SIEM solution out there. Care and feeding. You need to take this serious. You got to start with the end in mind. You got to put an entire implementation plan together and understand what your use cases are. Understand what success means to you before you ever start it, right? If you don't know these things, it's going to get real blurry when you start talking to some of those people that do all these other, oh yeah, we have our product also does IPS, our product also does, the product also has threat hunting involved, and this SIEM has UBA built in as well, and this SIEM does, that can be phase 2. Start with the basics, right? Keep it simple, stupid, right? So that's the most important thing. I think that's the end of my slideshow. So I can go back and ask, I can leave this open for questions now. If anyone's got questions, I think you've been chatting them. So I'll open it up and ask if there are any questions I can talk about.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. I think we do have Stefan and Jason Keith who are going to hop on. We've got a couple questions that have come through.
Okay.
Hey, Jeremy, great presentation. Appreciate you sharing that information. So I was asking about the resistance that community banks specifically find in implementing SIEMs or considering those solutions. Do you find that the people who are supporting them in a traditional manner, the MSPs, the support infrastructure they have in place, do you see resistance from them in implementing SIEMs, or are they perhaps offering SIEMs? You know, what do you see in the partnership working with their technology providers that they use in a traditional manner?
Yeah, so again, I think if I go back to the slide, everybody's got a solution for it. Some of the community banks, the smaller banks they're kind of already ingrained with their core, right? So they may be on one of the top core solutions, and they also do the Me Too IT. They do everything for them. They're outsourced everything, right? The problem that we found, and I'm not going to name any of these, but the problem that we found in working with some of the community banks is, again, that expertise, right? It's the could versus should. Can they stand up a SIEM? Absolutely. Is that their expertise, and do they actually have SIEM expertise on staff? Or is this just the IT guys that work for the core provider trying to make it happen because they can? And again, that's where you get down this path where I stood up, I talked to so many people when I go in, they've actually got a SIEM right now and it's not working for them. It's causing a lot of noise. I've actually went in where people stood it up and then turned it right back down. It just created too much havoc for them, caused them too much because they didn't think through this. I didn't have anybody to catch, and I'd rather not know than have a bunch of stuff I'm supposed to know and go check on it.
Hey, Jeremy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So, and I think you kind of addressed this a little bit in your playbook, your run book, but I'll tell you, my background was we stood one up, and like a lot of smaller banks, I was it. There was nobody else in house to kind of monitor things. We worked with the provider that monitored a desk 24/7. The thing I struggled with, and we were always refining it, but even at the end, the thing I struggled with most, and maybe get some guidance if you've got it, is when I should be woken up and what amount of control I should give my provider to take action, to stop things, to do things. Any thoughts on that you mind to share?
Absolutely. So we say this, we have this kind of rule of thumb. You can always tighten our security posture. Partners, my SOC guys, they don't have to ask permission to tighten security posture. And that means block an IP at the firewall, stop something. You have full permission. You don't need to wake me up. You can, and you can text me and you can tell me, hey, I did this, but you don't need my permission to tighten our security posture. You only need to wake me up, and you only need my permission if you want to loosen or open our security posture, meaning, hey, I want to whitelist this thing through, or hey, this alert is really noisy and I don't want to get it anymore. Can we turn that alert off? That's when you need to make sure that your run book. So again, if you come at this with your point is valid, you need to have run books that say, if it is something that is attacking us at 2 a.m., my SOC guys for example, today at night, they know, block it at the firewall, add it to the IP restriction list, boom, it's gone, right? Now, that doesn't mean we're done with that alert, right? We're still going to, and I might not, the guys at night might not even have the expertise. They might want to wait till the SME comes in the morning to say, hey, we looked into this, here's all the data that we found. You're going to want to dig into this, because what you want to know from those alerts is not that it happened, right? It's not that you got an alert, it's why. We talk about this a lot when I'm out there. We talk about root cause. What was the root cause? Why did you get the alert in the first place, right? That's where you need to focus. That's where you need to spend your time. And again, waking me up in the middle of the night to talk about it, it's really actionable intelligence. What can I do about this tonight? What can I do about this when it happens? And the more you can build that, and again, automation, for example, you can build this same mindset into automation where it says, if we get this type of an alert, let's say it's an attack against, we're starting to see an incoming barrage port scan. You can set up your automation to automatically grab that, automatically put that IP and restrict it, and a human never got involved. So very important. Hope that answers your question.
I think so. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great concept, Jeremy, to empower security at the lowest level. That concept you mentioned is saying, hey, it's okay at any time, lock it down at any time, no questions asked. We've got to open up now. We got to talk about it. That's a great concept. I hope people take that away. What about incorporating your SIEM to look beyond your own network? Since we have so many things going to a SaaS or a cloud environment, how important has that been, and how much have you seen of that where the SIEM is looking beyond just your own network, but to the other services you're getting provided?
Yeah, we're doing that today. There are things out there. If you get into the cloud, you really want to look at what's called a CASB, or a cloud access security broker. You want to get things that actually do this for a living, so to speak, right? That are out there watching things in the cloud. When you start to offshore logs back in, right? When you start to try to get logs out of things, again, you've got to go back and make sure you got sensitivity to what it's doing to your egress pipe, what it's doing to your internet pipe, that bandwidth, right? So again, even one of the lessons we've learned is that you have to consider those things, because if you turn on that use case and it chokes out 1/4 of your internet, and oh, by the way, you're already at 3/4, right? You create a production problem, but it's totally possible. We do it, for example, today with Office 365. Probably most of you have your email right in the cloud, and we get some of those 365 logs back, and we correlate those. And then again, the other thing is, if you get those logs back, you can share them with your other security tools. So very, very important.
What about the integration with cores? You mentioned a lot of banks, obviously all have a relationship with a core, and certainly the core has their own responsibility to protect, the data from that portion. But are you seeing any cooperation or resistance from cores participating in some of this process?
I see resistance across the board when it comes to bank operations, right? And that's, I assure you, in any bank, you're going to find this, right? The application owners, the core providers, even the IT guys are always going to resist you wanting to get in there and take a look and start to scrutinize, right? They're always going, well, this could impact performance. And I've had all of those discussions, right? Again, that's why you develop your use case and you go to those people first and you sit down and say, this is what we're planning to do. This is how we're planning to do it. And even talking through that with them in making sure that we're going to do this in a test phase, so they understand when we turn it on. I get it, right? The IT and security are diabolically opposed to, IT's goal in the world, the CIO's goal is to keep it up and keep 100% functionality running all the time, uptime. That's their number one, 3 nines, right? 5 nines. That's what everybody talks about. That's what a CIO cares about. I could care less as a CISO whether or not it's running. If it's running, I want it to be secure. So we're totally right. Don't get me wrong, right? I believe Pinnacle Blue. I want our network to always run, but that is not my top priority. My top priority is, if it's running, it needs to be secure. And the CIO, luckily, I have a CIO that is absolutely agreeing with me. He wants the same thing. So luckily, I have that, and hopefully you guys get that. But that does not mean that people below the CIO is going to want to be enthused about it, right? People on your application security teams, people on your analyst teams, they're not going to be thrilled because you want to inject something into their world. So you have to go talk to them. You have to tell them how you're going to do it. And a lot of times, again, not all applications, not all servers are created equal. So how the application and what the application is putting into the logs, you might find that there's no value for you to ingest that log because it doesn't. For example, we've seen applications that don't necessarily alert to escalated privileges. Well, then you need to figure out what it is you want to see with that. But core banking, that's our number one thing, is we're trying to get it around. Again, what I would tell you is, it goes back to the dentist doing open heart surgery. Do you want your core provider who focuses on cores all day, every day, and that's what they're focused on with their waterfall programming, that's what they're focused on with their development, that's what they're focused on, that's how they make their monies. Do you really want them trying to be your security partner? Or do you want people who focus on nothing but security to be your security partner? And I'm not just saying that because I run a company that does that. I'm telling you, when you pick a partner, make sure that they are absolutely the best at what they do. Don't try to get a me too. Oh yeah, we can do that for you. That's the worst thing I've ever heard is, yeah, we can do that for you. It's not that. It's, should you? It's the question you should say back to them. Should you do that for me?
That's a great point you bring up about the friction between availability and security, and I think that's something that a takeaway people should bring from this is make sure you're asking that question. When you're asked, can we do something? Can we make it work? Can we make it happen? You need to make sure you're including it. Can we make it work? Can we make it happen securely? And hopefully people are thinking about that. Well, I really appreciate the message you delivered today. I know people have taken a lot from it. Jason, any further comments from you before we go?
No, thank you very much, Jeremy.
Appreciate it.